Let's do it. Michael, welcome. Let's kick things off. Could you share a bit about your background and the journey that led you to founding your current tech startup? And give us the name of it. What was the spark, the inspiration that set you on this path?
I'm a maniac. So a couple of things. One, I was the CTO at this company. It was in the business finance space, and it was a bit of an eye-opener for me in that they reached out to me and said, hey, we've got this company, we want to double the size of it, and we have a lot of inbound leads. We want you to automate everything from the point when that comes in, and you have a background in building custom applications and then Salesforce around CRM. And I was like, yeah, sure, it was a great fit, and it was an awesome thing. And I think when I got into the company, what I didn't realize was their single lead source was cold outreach.
Yeah.
So they were specifically using cold email, and I was like, does that work? Because I think my perception was business-to-business email or any cold outreach was just not effective. And it couldn't be any further from the truth. They were generating 100 to 200 qualified leads a day. We doubled the sales team inside of 6 months and grew the company quite rapidly. And that presented the opportunity to learn about, well, how do you create cold outreach systems that are effective? And the second part to it was realizing the problems with it and the difficulty in managing it. So that's really where I learned about that particular aspect of it. And a big component of it was data. And then the other part was creating cold outreach systems for email, and also had a background in LinkedIn outreach. So that's really how I arrived at Opps, was just the challenges I had with, one, getting data that was very hard to manipulate. And I was constantly moving and managing CSV files, bought like $250,000 of data from one of the leading vendors, and it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare making that data useful for the outreach campaigns. And so what I really resolved was a couple things. One, managing data, and then two, managing cold outreach assets like domains and emails, where you're sending, you're using multiple identities, 10, 20, 30 email domains to send campaigns that are segmented. So you want really good data, and you want to understand about the customer. You don't want to have to constantly upload and download CSVs and reformat them. And then you want to be able to manage both the segmented assets, like the email domains and campaigns, and then the responses to those campaigns. All those things are very, very cumbersome. So that was really where I started from, was the problem around, look, cold outreach is a very effective way to grow a business. It's very complicated to set up cold outreach systems. How do we simplify this? How do we make it so it's less manual, and you can just tell a piece of software, hey, create a campaign targeting this segment. And that was really where it started.
Cool. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced during the initial stages of development?
Oh my God. So you start off with the design, which is that's kind of like the honeymoon phase of development. So you're imagining what this application is going to look like. And initially when I looked at Ops, which is really a short form for opportunities, but in a sense also operations, although that would be misspelled. Sales operations specifically. So first of all, you're designing it. So you're designing the application where, what are the screens, what's the user experience, how does someone sign up, how does someone search for or find the records they want, and then move data around. So then the designer creates something based upon what you've explained to them and laid out. So that phase was kind of phase one. And then what you're doing is you're taking that to your development team, and you're figuring out the architecture. So we had the first design on Ops done probably by April of last year. And then we started coding May. And that's when you're taking the pictures and you're trying to put features behind the pictures. So you're building the database and application layer. And that's when it gets really challenging, because it's easy to imagine pictures and pushing buttons and everything's working perfectly. Sometimes you imagine things wrong and you're using it in reality. So we came out with a version inside of 2 months. We rapidly prototyped it so that by August we had something to play with. We were kind of working on initial bugs. And then by September, we started doing some onboarding calls. We did 100 onboarding calls between September and November to get feedback on the product. And that really told us where there were problems and where there was opportunities for new features. So we kind of mapped out what those new features were and started looking at developing in January some new features and rolling those out. But that was kind of the journey of you design it and then you start building to it. Nothing works perfectly. It's really frustrating because you want it to work perfectly.
Right.
But then you're doing user feedback early gave us really, really good input on, yes, this is something I would use. It has to do these things. You had kind of differing opinions on that. And then trying to slowly pick a lane so you weren't building in the dark. And that's really how we got to here.
Cool. How do you foresee your product impacting the industry and the market in the next 5 years?
Man, that's an interesting question. So first of all, there's a real culture around cold outreach platforms and data right now, and there's a good ecosystem, and so it's very competitive. So you really got to be niche. So is that you're a specific type of data provider? Are you providing certain features? I think where we're going with it is two things. One, we have a data marketplace. So we allow content creators, and I say content creators like B2B outreach agencies or B2B lead generation agencies are creating data sets all the time. And some of them are really novel and unique, and there's an audience for that. But there's no real iTunes of data. So we created a data marketplace where we can create any data product that's kind of a pre-built, curated data set that someone can go in and buy. And they can buy it either as a subscriber with tokens in Opps, or they can pay cash for it. So that's the first thing. I think that's a really unique thing that will allow people that are scraping and enriching data now to get some more ROI on their data sets and sell it multiple times. You want to be careful about that. So I think it's almost like the flash sale, limited time, limited quantity is really advisable so you don't burn out a list and it's really good data. So I think that's the first thing. I think the data marketplace offers both those data creators and users a way to find curated data sets. The second thing is beyond that is really around Valet. And Valet is our AI, generative AI platform. And right now you can, instead of pushing filters or just picking a product, you can say in plain English to Valet, which is essentially a chatbot inside of Opps right now. You can say to it, create a list targeting this segment, this industry, this title, this size of company. And similar to how you would normally just push buttons and pick filters, you can just say it in plain English like you would to ChatGPT, and it'll come back with a similar or the same result. So I think that's really important because the next phase of that we're building is, well, wait, now you have data and you want to create a campaign by email, or you want to create a campaign by LinkedIn, or maybe you want to pull data from CRM, or you want to do a report in CRM. I see each of those as skills. So as we do more and more integrations for Valet inside of Opps, you're having to move CSVs and data less and less. And you're having to use fewer tools for automation, and you're having less of a burden upon salespeople and marketers and even lead generation agencies of having to create all these one-off automations, having to create integrations. And instead, you can just be inside of Opps, talk to Valet, tell it the outcome you want. So I think that's really going to be impactful, where you're not just using generative AI to create copy and to write, because that's what large language models are really good at. But you can actually tell Valet, do this thing, and it takes action for you. It creates automations in the background. It can, once you're integrated, it can move data around. It can interpret responses and take action. So that's really where I see Valet and Opps going.
How do you plan to scale your product to accommodate when the user base starts growing?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Part of it is designing it so it's multi-tenant. So we've done that. There's obviously very scalable backends from AWS to Google Cloud that we're hosted on. And I think it's just a matter of doing a really good job of having a defined feature set and making sure that the people that are coming in are getting what they expect. So that's the first thing. And then just trying not to be a Swiss Army knife of everything. That's the real risk that we run, is trying to do everything for everybody. So I think a key to scaling is just having a really targeted audience. Initially, we're targeting founders that are either raising money or are looking they're engaged in founder-led sales. So they don't necessarily have a sales operations department, they don't have a big sales team, but they need to do outreach by LinkedIn or email or other types of campaigns. So we're very focused on that initially. And then selling to specific departments or titles, right? So we want to create a culture around generative conversational outreach. We want to get away from cold outreach. We want to get away from people pitching. We want this to be the platform that you use to try to figure out, how do I, find someone that looks like my ideal investor or customer, but then how do I reach out to them to start a conversation? And that's more important than pitching or telling your story before you have a relationship with them. So really what we're trying to do is make it a conversational platform, not just a cold outreach platform.
What role does user feedback play in your product development cycle?
Man, it's everything. There's obviously different opinions when you show someone your product. I think what we did earlier, as I mentioned, is in over 2 months, we used cold outreach to reach people that we thought were our ideal customer. So founders, sales leaders, marketing leaders. And we showed them and demoed where the product was at, and I showed them the product roadmap. And from there, we would get feedback from them. And anytime someone would sign up for Opps, we would send them obviously surveys to gather feedback. So getting that feedback is really, really critical. And I think we took the good, which was, hey, we really like your UI. It's very simple and intuitive. And the bad, which is this part doesn't work, you need to fix it. And that was really, really, really helpful. And that's going to be really important going forward. As much as we want to keep rolling out features, I don't want to just keep rolling out features for the sake of it. And more, I want it to be magic. I want it to be like you are increasingly talking to Valet as the expert in SaaS. I want you not to have to be an expert in ops. I want you to be an expert in understanding what you need. I need a campaign. I need a data set. I need messaging that opens the conversation, and it really being a true co-pilot and delivering the result that you expect.
How do you ensure that your product remains innovative in a rapidly changing tech landscape?
So hard. I think, again, there's the temptation is that you build a Swiss Army knife and just keep adding features. And I think we want to have a roadmap that's specific. We get feedback on the roadmap early, as we mentioned. And I think the difference is not building something that's more button pushing, but that's more conversational between you and Ops Copilot, which is Valet, and then helping you create conversations in a meaningful way where you're getting the right result. So I think focusing on that niche audience, like who's using it, what do they expect, what's the outcome that they're expecting, and then making sure they get it. I think that's the new generation of products. In the past, we were trying to do that with user interface. Now it's if a user says X, what do they expect, and are you delivering that thing? So I think it's a little bit different. It's interpreting what words mean what outcomes, and that's really, I think, how we do it. Instead of focusing on more buttons, more features, we focus on more understanding of the user and what it needs, and then delivering it like magic.
Okay. What are some ethical considerations you've had to address with your product?
Everyone's concerned about data, so you have to make sure that you're complying with things like GDPR. If data is publicly available and can be acquired and enriched using publicly available information, I think that's the first thing. And then I think you just want to be, I think that the whole outreach space borders on what people consider unethical or annoying behavior. And there's probably a line there. And I think where we want to err is we want to be effective, so we're allowing people to connect with other people. That's what we're focused on. We're focused on conversational outreach, right? So using generative to create conversations. So I think that's the most ethical you can be in outreach. You're finding the right person, thinking about, based upon what you learn about them at some sort of scale using data, what's relevant to them, and then being right about that. So I think that's very ethical, which is you send someone a message that they appreciate, and it creates a new connection for them. And that's what we want to do. And so I think that's the most ethical aspect of our outreach that we're focused on. And that's the type of culture and community that we want to build. How
do you balance innovation with practicality in your product design?
Oh my God, it's so hard. I mean, I could keep building, right? If I have money, I can build. If I have imagination, I can build. And you get a lot of looking at other people's products and getting FOMO and trying to figure out, well, if I had this, I could compete. But then that doesn't differentiate you. So I think you've got to, again, focus on the person that you're serving and what the real problem they're having is, and don't get scared or don't be scared to imagine how you can use the current technology to solve it in a magical way. I think that's the biggest thing. You get limited by your imagination, and the temptation is to copy and have a Me Too feature. So it's like an arms race. Whereas the innovation piece, I think, is really having those conversations, taking that feedback, and having a way to deliver it in a unique manner. And I think that's kind of veer both ways, right? You want success, so you listen to people, but they don't always know what they want. They just know what their pain is, and they think they know the solution, but if you can deliver something better than that, I think that's where the magic comes from. And that's why I think the conversational interface is increasingly really interesting. If you can accurately use, I think is really a good job for AI, is understanding the person said this, what they mean is this, and I know it, and if I deliver it, they confirm it. So creating that feedback loop is really important, and I think that's how you be innovative now, as opposed to just adding more features that someone else has built and copying it in the same way.
Can you discuss any partnerships or collaborations that have been crucial to your product's development?
Well, we've had some really excellent feedback from people that are in the cold outreach community. And part of that is on how the product roadmap, and part of it is on the new culture that we want to create around conversational outreach. And I think it aligns with what they're thinking, which is have better data on people and more accurate messaging that they want to receive. So that it's not so much cold and it's more conversational, and that's the bridge. So that those partnerships have been really, really important. We have a great development team, so just the partnership with the developers, even though it's internal, has really, really been helpful. And then we have some interesting early customers where we've had success, and they've been tolerant of us figuring things out in a non-scalable way. So just like Reid Hoffman says in Blitz Scaling, says you do things that don't scale. I think that's how you find out something that you want to automate, and that's been really important, is that partnership with people that are founders that need new business and they see this as something to invest in, and they're tolerant of us kind of doing some stuff in an automated way and other stuff manually. That's been really, really important.
What has been the most surprising feedback you've received from a customer or a user?
I've had some accidental success in outreach. So we start with the philosophy of generative conversational outreach, and we encourage them to not think of just telling their story or pitching right away, but offering something of value, and not like a thing, but how do you enhance the profile maybe of the person you're reaching, or you say something that is truly relevant. You're not guessing, but you've got data that's accurate and the right message. So what was surprising, I think, to me was we had a really tough category of audience to reach our chief HR officers and chief people officers. They get pitched a lot. There's a lot of turnover in the last 24 months of that. And I think they see a lot of things come into their inbox that are really trying to sell them. And it's thinly veiled. And I think what was surprising was we had another hypothesis. Our thesis was, well, let's just bring all that audience together and get them to be an ongoing advisor in this company. And they never really thought of that before. And I think what was surprising was the success of that, because I think we had 90 CHROs in a very, very high value, very difficult category join an advisory that they created out of thin air. And now every other month they meet with them, they show their product, they show their progress as a business, and they get feedback from them. And from there, before they ever pitch them, what they're really doing is they're getting that ongoing feedback, and they're building a relationship with those people. And a lot of them, it was funny because they were like, well, can I put it on my LinkedIn that I'm an advisor? And of course. So it was a really interesting win-win. I think that's an example of conversational outreach that really validated this thesis that let's not rush to the sale. We obviously want to get there. Let's focus on the relationship and how I can help the person and give them something of value that is also valuable to me. And I think that was really surprising, and that really solidified the approach of the company.
How do you stay motivated and inspired while navigating the ups and downs of a startup?
It's tough. You're wearing many hats, right? And I think I thrust myself into something where I go into build and product and feedback mode, and then now I've got to switch because I built something that I think is sellable, and I got to think of the messaging and the sales process, and I got to go back and try to connect with people live. And that switch is very hard, and sometimes you take it personally. And I think the biggest mistake, but the most human thing, is to personalize the standards you're putting out for yourself. So it's very, very difficult sometimes because you're talking to yourself and you're not getting maybe other founder feedback, and maybe you have a lull in your communication with people, and you really question yourself when you're in that that stage where you're switching from build to sell. Bigger corporations or bigger companies obviously have people that are very siloed and they focused on one area, and you don't really have that. You got to mentally switch it up, and that's tricky. So I think it's been really important to talk to people you trust, talk to more and more customers, not to assume that everyone's going to reject what you're coming out with, or that, oh, I just built something that no one seems to want. But the truth is, you just need to put it out there, talk to more people, and ramp it up. And that's just a tricky thing. You're going from the lab or the basement to out in public, and you're putting on a show to try and get attention. So that switch is a little tricky, but it's really important to make that, and that's part of this.
What role do you believe competition plays in driving your product forward?
There's a lot of products in this space, and there's a lot of companies that have really good culture and funding now. And I think it's, how do you find your niche that allows you to cooperate with more of them and not compete? And I think that's how you differentiate yourself. I was listening to one gentleman who has been an advisor or part of some really big data startups, for example, and he talked about micro modes. And I think that's the thing I'm trying to get my head continuously wrapped around, which is find a small area that you can niche down in and you're not competing with someone in. And it's like Peter Thiel says, come up with your own monopoly. Your 0 to 1 is you carving out your own monopoly. And maybe that isn't like a long thing. Maybe it's a short, small, deep monopoly. So like, for example, you specialize in conversational outreach to investors in different categories. And there are people trying to do that or doing that. And I think it's just like, well, we have a unique approach to that. It's not just data. It's not just like mechanical campaigns. Here's how you open conversations that people want to have. Same thing with CHROs. We've had success in that space, and I think that's another well that we go down. And it's like, well, let's be the easiest way to reach the inbox with relevant messaging to people in the human resources department, and allow you to make friends with look like your ideal customer or your ideal investor. So I think that's really important.
For sure. Can you share some insights into your product development team, culture, and dynamics?
I think we're really lucky. I have a really good counterpart that focuses on managing the development team. The developers are very outcome motivated in the sense of, well, first of all, we have a great designer. Let's start with that. So we have a great designer. Elaine has been working with me on various projects, a lot of client projects for like 9, maybe 10 years. And she really understands user experience and design. I think that's where everything starts from. So the culture there is, how do we make this nice for the user and unique? And how do we make this a positive experience? And then we have a development team that takes that seriously and will offer innovation and solutions within that framework of what the designer creates. So I think both those things have been very, very positive.
That's cool. How do you approach risk management and uncertainty in your startup journey?
It's scary. I've chosen to bootstrap to a certain point, and I think that's like keep pushing that envelope to reach certain results in the product and then maybe the first customers. And then when I really think I have something repeatable, I've talked to people that might invest in it. So I think risk is, well, there's a point where, and I've reached a few points where I've bootstrapped and maybe was a little too aggressive, or it slows you down, and that's a risk too. You run the risk of building the wrong thing and running out of money, and those are all risks, right? So I think it's like imagining what's my threshold for pain and cash, and then what's an appropriate point to bring in outside people where I can demonstrate that, look, this is the way I thought it would work, this is the way it works, or this is the response to the thing that I built, and then bringing in people that are then willing to invest in that. And I think that's, to me, the biggest risk is you run out of money, you run out of energy. So I think we're at a point now where we need to bring in new team members and a little bit more capital and not going crazy, because I've seen startups that we've been friends with that they'll go through $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, shockingly, and they don't have a great product, and they're still struggling with that, and they don't have a lot of customers. So I think the key is focus on a really good product, talking to the customer a lot, and then talking to other stakeholders that would be willing to invest in the next stages to fuel it, and not go crazy with just like, okay, we got a ton of money and let's just build whatever the hell we think and throw it against the wall and hope. So I think we've just been really considerate of, here's our thesis, are we hitting the thesis, is the feedback still good, and just managing that in a kind of conservative way.
What is your long-term vision for the company, and how does this product fit into that vision?
I think the long term is valet. Like, I think what I want is an intelligent co-pilot agent, which is valet, that understands what I'm asking it to do and will do it. And so I don't have to be an expert in all kinds of different systems, and those systems aren't siloed, but it hides the difficult things we're doing today that take time and energy and very robot-like thinking, and it creates a personal connection between me and other people. And that's what I really think as a company is really the future. I think we're going to demonstrate that through Ops and how Ops connects to other things and hides very manual, complicated things that not every black arts. I just want to have a relationship with Valet as a user. And I think I want many people that are in roles right now where they're spending 70-80% of their time messing around with SaaS and data, like salespeople, marketers, even agencies, and flip that so that what they're doing is they're being an expert in relationships and delivering value to a customer, not in all the things to reach the customer. So that's really where I think we go with it.
Oh, that's cool. How do you handle skepticism or criticism about your product or business model?
I think you got to consider the source, and I think that there's a lot of really good people out there. So I think we're at a point where we've had friendly criticism that's been accurate, and you're back up a little bit, or you feel deflated sometimes, and you just gotta go, no, that's really important information. So I think you have to have an open mind and a way to deal with it and filter, like, if someone thinks it's just horrible, which really hasn't happened yet, fall off the edge of the earth with it. If anything, it's the self-criticism of the product, because my standard or our standard is very high. So I think that's what you got to deal with more. And I think getting that outside feedback is really important, especially if you want that to be your customer or partner.
Cool. What are the key milestones you've set for your product launch and beyond?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think we're at a really good stage right now where we have an excellent data marketplace. We can add any curated data set that people can find. We've made it so that there's an integration between Ops and Smartly, which is a leading cold outreach platform, so that we can data and campaigns all from Ops. And we have Ops Plus, which same thing, like you create automated outreach email campaigns. So we have really good data in the marketplace. We also have really good searchable records. And then where I think that goes is one of two ways. Like Ops and Valet technically are different products. So Valet, what we will focus on is, again, eliminating the need to be an expert CRM user, an expert cold outreach SaaS user, an expert data researcher. We want to increasingly make it so salespeople or marketers or lead gen agency, just tell Valet what they want and they get it. On the ops side, we want to make it so that we have integrations to pull in many data sets and remix it in an easier and easier fashion. And maybe the interface is increasingly Valet for that. So that can be inside Ops or outside Ops eventually. So I think that's where those two things go. I think the Ops product, we just make it easier to get data, enrich it so that we can create personalized messaging. And then Valet, we make it the expert on, we need to execute outreach and then responses to outreach so that there's more conversations for people that are users.
How do you prioritize features and improvements during the development process?
I think linearly. So I think of the workflow that I follow when I set up a campaign, for example, in this case, to start. And the thesis being that I don't want to continuously have to register domains, add them to warm up, write copy, move data, remove data into campaigns. I just want to be able to tell the software, create a campaign targeting this segment with this messaging and outcome, and it understands the other things. So I'm prioritizing all the little steps to get to that point. After that, I'm envisioning what happens with the conversation when I get a positive or negative response. And those are the future features. Like, do I move data to CRM, like for Salesforce? When it's in CRM, what are the difficult things in CRM that users are having to do, like reports, updating stages on opportunities, or pulling data back for re-engagement campaigns from those systems, creating an invoice in another system or a quote in that system or another system. So I'm thinking of all the things that the user would do in other systems and stacks, and then I'm prioritizing okay, this much, and then that's really the roadmap.
Cool. Can you talk about a pivotal moment that's influenced your product's direction?
So we had two interesting false starts. So we built a data product initially, and then the idea was always to connect that to campaigns so that we don't have to move data around. So that involved connecting to a piece of software. I was connecting to a partner's piece of software initially, and they unfortunately ran into a lot of success early, and then they ran into a non-compete really quickly. So I had spent months building that integration and was trying to get them to more capabilities, and then they ran into a wall, and that kind of put a little bit of a wall for me, and I had to retreat and find another scenario that worked. And that's where we kind of landed on our own outreach tool, and then and Smart Lead as one integrating platform. It was a very, very, very difficult thing to deal with, because it was like we put a lot of effort in, and then we had to come back and do it again. But that's been really well in the end. We also had a really pivotal point where we were demoing just the data part, and if people can't find their record, even though we would curate data or we had certain data, if they can't find their record, they would get frustrated. So, very important to get that feedback. And so that led us to, a partnership that brought in a lot more data, like all the data. So that was really pivotal. And then I would say the third part was really when we were building the first version of Valet. Because the idea with Valet was not initially, I had these two concepts of different products. And I was like, well, actually Valet really fits really well here. Like, why am I still pushing buttons in a SaaS as a user? I see generative products that are generating content, and they're generating copy, and they're generating marketing materials. So, very content or driven actions, but they're not automating anything. So it was an opportunity there that I realized to take the burden off the user and just tell Valet, no, you're the expert in ops, and you're the expert in this other platform, and you'll be the expert in these other systems. Teach the AI to have those skills. And so that was very pivotal to this point as well.
Cool. How do you measure success for your product, both short term and long term?
I mean, people using it and liking it and sticking. Yeah. I think I tend to go in that direction, there on. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, the thing is, build something as you imagined it, it works. And then when you go out and show someone, they have a positive response. And then if they're willing to give you money or at least use it, then that's, ultimate success is measured.
For sure. What strategies are you employing to generate buzz and awareness for your product launch?
Man, this is honestly, shockingly, my hardest thing to do. Founder content on LinkedIn, I'm pushing the envelope on that. We obviously do, to certain segments to get feedback on the product or to see if they're a good fit as a customer. So there's that. And then, buzz, I would say. So getting on podcasts, doing a live weekly webinar for the rest of the year that we invite people to that would be interested in a topic, and then just giving sets that people might want, giving ideas or scripts that they might want, giving them access to the tool to use to give us feedback without worrying about whether they're paying us or not. We're giving them a really good version, like a freemium version of the product. Or a lifetime version, like we have a lifetime product that we give. And I think just having constant public communication is really going to be really important. And I know that, and it's difficult for me to do that, but that's the game plan.
Cool. What are the main metrics you track to gauge your product's performance in the market?
I mean, it's two things. One, can I use the product to do the things I expect it to do? And then can I use it to deliver an outcome that the customer wants? And then increasingly, it's almost like, the unscalable stage, right? Like, even if the customer doesn't understand it, can I smooth it over, but use it effectively so it still takes me no time? And that's really my goal there. The next phase would be, will someone just sign up and get it? They'll understand what to do, tell it what to do, it does the thing, and then they stay and pay. So I think that's the next phase. So those are kind of between those two phases right now.
Cool. How do you approach fundraising and investor relations for your startup?
Bootstrap to this point, talk to friends and family that are interested in, those people are investors, which is, I think just sharing the roadmap and the vision, and if the feedback's positive, staying in touch with them.
Cool. Advice would you give to aspiring tech entrepreneurs who are just starting out?
Oh my God, it's the biggest thing is, I have a little bit of resilience and not personalize things, which I do terribly. And this is probably, I wish I would give myself that advice more, but It's have an idea, design it first, talk to investors and customers early, and get that feedback, and don't stop. Keep that line of communication. The build in public thing has been very difficult for me, shockingly. It's like I hide until something looks perfect. And the more comfortable that we can all get with imperfection actually works really well. And I've followed creators on LinkedIn and Twitter who have done build in public much better than I have. And I try to use that as a motivator. And so I would just say, design something you believe in, tell the story that's ambitious of it, and then as you build, share the ups and downs of that, and get have a trusted circle too. That really well.
Yeah. Maintain a work-life balance, or is that even a thing
while
running the tech startup?
I think that's actually a pain in the neck. Like I think, last year personally, like I've had a lot of changes in travel, and that, if anything, I think is that unbalanced to me. I feel like when you have a startup, it's like a baby, and you gotta you owe that baby everything if you really want it to be successful. And I may be guilty at times of I don't make a priority for it, but sometimes you're limited, right? So I think balance is go all in and enjoy what you're doing, and sometimes it can be painful, so you have to have that social mastermind type circle and talk to more customers, and that really helps to value what you're doing. And so I don't think there's balance of work and play. I think you make work play, make that your game.
Cool. How do you address user privacy and data security concerns with your product?
I mean, we live in a hack world, right? So you have to do your best to secure your application. You have to have multiple factors for people to log in. You have to protect personal information, or just not collect personal information is the preference. And then from a data component of it, you just got to make sure that any of the data that we have, even though we may have assembled it in a useful format, is publicly available, and that you comply with, example. That's really, really important.
Cool. Can you describe your approach to customer service and user support?
Yeah, right now it's very one-to-one. So you can book time to do an onboarding. You can book, keep that bite-sized in the sense of you can book a 15-minute onboarding, not an hour. You can book a 15-minute support call. And then we have Slack for, communication. And then I think just making the product easier and easier to use is really important. And then we've got a lot of video and other, type resources that we're going to put out. But I think for now, I was inspired a little bit by Raul Vora from Superhuman. And Raul was on my old podcast, Automate and Grow. And he did the first 1,000 onboardings for his customers. And so I've really taken that to heart. Obviously the first 100 and now the next 100. So I reach 1,000, I don't even think I can back off of that. So it's a little bit intense sometimes, but it's a good intense, you want to be onboarding people. So I'm always accessible. We have a couple onboardings today, for example, and I think that's really, really important that you take a personal approach initially.
What are some key lessons you've learned about leadership while growing your startup?
Wear my heart on my sleeve, and that's bad sometimes because I get frustrated. But you have to assume the best in the people you have, and if they're not putting their best foot forward, then you can't have them early on. So assuming you've done a great job, which I think we have, of bringing in people that believe what we're building and have skill sets to contribute, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt, and there's got to be some incentive. So I think leadership there is, the tough on myself, being tough on the product, but being friendly and appreciating people for the contribution they're making. If they're not, just have a conversation. But we've been really, really lucky. We have a great small team, but I guess that's leadership in a sense, where I've been consistently communicating the vision as we chunk off pieces of that vision, showing appreciation, and then just trying to engage people and give them more and more responsibility or latitude to contribute to it.
Cool. Can you talk about the role mentorship has played in your entrepreneurial journey?
Man, not much. I don't know. I think the people that I learn from maybe don't know that I learned from them. There's people I respect, and I really treat a lot of people as a case study. So sometimes that's people who are building in public, advice from people that I trust. And I think that's, if anything, it's not like I have a method that I'm emulating. It's more, I have a vision of where we're going and who's kind of components of it. and that I respect, and I don't want to be burdensome to them, but I ask their opinion. I really value their opinion. So maybe that's mentorship, but it's not like I have one figure that is really, really needed to
I like that.
direct me.
Yeah.
It can be tough. Like, it'd be nice to have that, but I don't know if I have that.
No, that's cool. How do you deal with the pressure and stress of launching and running a startup? Your outlet.
Really got to get out of your own head sometimes.
Yeah.
Talking to people really helps, and talking to, like I said, people you trust and that have skill sets or have done things that you appreciate without getting FOMO, and that's really tricky. And then talking to people that are customers and getting feedback is really, really helpful. So I think that is important, and talk to your founders about that experience. And then just trying to take care of yourself a little bit, like making sure that you're doing the usual, eating well, training, doing some cardio and core, and keeping your body fit, because it's really easy to let all that stuff go. And I think you gotta, maybe you need a massage, or maybe you need to go to the chiro, or maybe you need to go to the gym, or maybe you need to take a special class that someone else is running and you're not thinking about. And then just do things that are fun. I think you gotta give yourself a little break sometimes. But
Absolutely. What are some of the most rewarding moments you've experienced as a tech entrepreneur?
I mean, think of something and then you build it and it works. That's really nice. Especially if you're working out bugs. That's silly, but I think that's the biggest thing. It's involved in a couple other projects this year, which is one is we're getting ready to launch unrelated to Opps and Valet. We're getting ready to launch a social dog app, right? Which is Saturday Dog Club. And that's been really interesting because it was hey, this is the idea that they had for real life events. Here's how I would interpret it into an app. Did an amazing job building it, designing what that user experience would look like, and then the development team that we use built that as a project and built something that works exactly like that. So I think that's really rewarding, and the next rewarding part of that will be seeing users adopt it. But using it and the feedback being positive, that's really rewarding.
Michael, as we conclude, looking ahead, what are you most excited about for the future of your product and company? And what final piece of advice would you offer to aspiring entrepreneurs who are inspired by your journey?
I mean, for having Valet be magic is, not because it's just a product with a twist of a marketplace. We'll add some enrichment and other features, but getting away from the current paradigm of buttons on a screen and plugins and integrations to mapping that all over to a magical journey where it's no, I'm telling the robot to do the thing, it understands me, and it does it. So having that instant gratification, that's what I'm most looking forward to. Increasingly with that experience of I tell it to build a list, it builds a list, I get the list I want, and then next, being the same, that's going to be really exciting for me. And then I think advice is, again, have an idea, share that idea with people you trust, design first before you build. I know some people are coders, so they can bang out product pretty quick, and it's getting easier and easier to develop in product. So if you can do that inexpensively and get that in front of the person that you think or claim is your customer early, and getting feedback again and again and again, and just building that community around customers and advisors, that's what I recommend.
Hey, that's a wrap on that. Appreciate you, Michael. Yeah, look forward to it. Tell them where they can find your product. What's the website? What are we looking for? What to look out? How to get on the email list or whatever.
Yeah, so Opps.ai, we have some really interesting resources on there around conversational outreach. You can sign up at app.opps.ai also if you want to go directly. You can put any email address in and you'll get the ability to log in, search for data, and then create campaigns. And a great lifetime product that you'll be able to get on the website at Opps.ai. So if you just want to spend one amount of money, not have recurring bills, and have access to our marketplace of products, 5,000 records a month, or 15 actually, you could stack 3 codes. We have our own lifetime deal. That I think is a really good way. And we have a new newsletter coming out called Spam Lords, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but where we explore all the bad behavior of outreach and the culture that we want to change with generative conversational outreach. So we're kind of making a little bit of fun of it with Spam Lords. But yeah, you can sign up for that on the website as well.
Hey, you got it. That's a wrap on that. Thanks, Michael. And we done it. You killed that.